oh wow, things have improved in the last 10 years because I almost saw a 50-50 ratio of women and men. And I thought that's fantastic. Things have come a long way. And then a few months or weeks later, we were in a leadership team meeting with about 60, 70 people. At that time, it hit me that while, on the hiring front, that's great, but at the leadership level, there seems to be a problem. We have been beating this dead horse of the leaky pipeline and the missing middle, and that, we don't have a pipeline of leaders because women leave after 5 years, 4 years, and therefore you don't have a pipeline. Why not create returnship pathways? After 5 to 8 years or 10 years, at about 40, women are ready to get back into the workforce, right? And here is a talented, willing, employable talent pool that is available. Why can't we create some pathways into our workforce for them to enter? And again, I'm saying the word pathway with a lot of thought. It's not entry or exit. All of the research, there's enough research that's been done internationally to say organizations with diverse leadership, with diverse boards, diverse leadership teams are just better at innovation, are more profitable, create more shareholder value, are more sustainable, win over the long run. So it's kind of the tension between the long run and the short run. And therefore, the top leadership's commitment is very important, because if you're building an organization for the long run, you want to set it up for success, you want to have the diverse teams to enable success across your multiple cycles of change, paradigm shifts like we are going through today. Private organizations, large organizations, they finally are profit making ventures. Top line, bottom line are paramount, but only when the leadership understands or believes that gender diversity will aid that in some form of other or other, will there be conviction to make it happen. That is one. The second is, when you start to think about what to do, you'll have to create a business case, because, as I said, not individual is not sitting there to discriminate. But we are all products of our context. We are all products of the stereotype and the conditioning that we have grown up with. Women or anybody who's feeling that, to actually speak up. Speak up speak up as if you are part of the solution and not part of the problem. When you speak up is when others will get sensitized that, oh, maybe we need to look for solutions here. And gradually that might become a sustainable solution. When you are stuck here, and when you are really having to balance things, when you're really having to kind of say, what now? What do I do to climb back up? And that's where a lot of the growth happens. That's where kind of some of the seeds for the great work you are going to do later. And women, coming out of college, it's that decade between 25 to 35 when you're getting married, you have in-laws, your own family, your parents getting older, you decide to have children. There's just a lot of balls in the air. So far, any problem that came, you were able to address it, you were able to solve it because it was in your hands. But when it comes to your child, and even when the child is younger, you can step in. Child is older, it's hard to see them in that state. But you also know the right thing is to let them figure it out and to let them fail. And gift of failure is probably the biggest gift for them. So that is the hardest thing to do. about the upcoming podcast on building caring companies. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Richa Singh of Your Dost, co-founder and CEO, who are doing some great work on emotional wellness and mental well-being.
Hello everyone, welcome to Building Caring Companies podcast. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Pooja Sharma Goyal, a mother of two, an IITian, did her MBA from INSEAD, worked in the US, worked in India, serial entrepreneur herself, started her first organization in US, started and ran successfully in teletalks for 10 years before actually selling it profitably to clay schools. Started Avashkar, is right now the CEO of the Uditi Foundation. She has been awarded with Women Transforming India 2022 by Government of India. A fantastic human being, and I have learned so much from her. I cannot wait to have this conversation with her. Thank you so much for joining us today, Pooja. Probably I want to ask you, you grew up in Jaipur with four sisters. How was it like? How was your childhood like? Tell us something.
Thank you, Richa. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Growing up in Jaipur, it was kind of I'm the youngest of four sisters, so I always said I have four sets of parents. Pretty much, I got to do what I wanted to do. There were not too many expectations. Um, Came from a lower middle class family, so it was important to do well in academics, and a lot of the credit goes to the sister who's just older than me, Madhuri, who one I think I there were three things that she did. One was just getting me to read books. So she would really, at that time, it seemed force, but she got me into reading books, which is a habit that has stayed until now and has really helped me expand my worldview at different stages. It seems like at different stages of my life, the right book has shown up for me. Um, that has educated and informed my worldview and helped me make decisions at some of those inflection points. And the second was, she forced me out of my comfort zone. She would get me to, in school, participate in events and make sure that I was volunteering for different things, which was not my normal inclination. But that has served me well. And the third was, um, she always wanted me to get good marks. Um, so even though there were no high expectations on what I do, but now in hindsight, when I look at it, I think that was the period. If I kind of divide my life into these three parts, that was the period which was about getting freedom, or getting to a stage where you had the freedom to make your own choices and make your own decisions, and a lot of the pursuit of academics, doing well in exams, studying for IIT, all of that was essentially driven towards getting to a stage where you can make your own choices. Where you're going to work, what you're going to do, who you're going to marry, all of that comes from that hard work you put into that. And so that growing up in Jaipur was about that time, and I had um, that support system, that loving, caring a home to enable that.
But Madhuri definitely sounds like, so inspired to hear about her, right? I think giving you that space where you could explore, you could make your own choices and learn so many different things. I think that also shows up from being a serial entrepreneur to investor to mentor to worked at different companies. I think probably definitely at least from the outside that definitely seems like the foundation. But I also wanted to understand a little bit, right? You went into IIT. You then went to do you started your own company. You went to do another master's. You joined Adobe as well. You worked in Adobe in the US. You worked in Adobe in India. How's the cultures at the organization or working in US, working in India different, right? From a workplace perspective? I'm keen to understand that as well.
Quite fortunate in terms of working with organizations uh, that were that were very progressive, liberal, had really great cultures. So when I coming out of IIT, I joined a strategy consulting firm called Feedback Ventures, and it was a great learning experience. In the US at Adobe, it was a very understated culture. The company was not loud. Um, I never ever even thought about diversity or being the only woman, or um, it was just inherently a very inclusive and diverse culture. And really, nobody thought too much about it. At least I didn't at that time. And it was early on in my career. Saw the same thing when I transitioned to India, to the India office in Noida. Pretty much a very supportive, innovative culture. The ability to take risks, the ability to do many different things uh, was quite encouraged as an organization. When I moved back to India, we moved as a family, my children, my husband, and I had transitioned with Adobe US to Adobe India. And one of the days I was taking the elevator, and I felt, oh wow, things have improved in the last 10 years, because I almost saw a 50-50 ratio of women and men. And I thought, that's fantastic. Things have come a long way. And then a few months or weeks later, we were in a leadership team meeting with about 60, 70 people. At that time, it hit me that while, on the hiring front, that's great, but at the leadership level, there seems to be a problem. And now that I'm running Udayti Foundation, and we talk a lot about, and we are working a lot on increasing women's participation in the economy, that continues to be a big problem. Having women in leadership positions so that you can create some of those diverse cultures which are very important in this kind of VUCA world of today.
I want to also understand a little bit more, right? While you were in the Adobe in the US, when you moved to Adobe in India, I think you had a very young child and you had to move here because of your own personal reasons. How was it? Was it easier to manage in the US? Was it easier to manage? How did the work culture look like?
That 1 year was very hard. So when we moved here, it was meant to be a 2 year move. My mother-in-law was battling terminal cancer, and it was meant to be a 2 year move. My company, Adobe, and my husband's company, SAP, both agreed for us to be here. And my children were 1 and 3 at that time. And, like a few months into that transition, I remember Alok, my husband, and I kind of talking about what did we do? Oh my God. It was really hard to balance two careers, two really young children, yeah, an ailing parent. So it was extremely tough. And at that time, I think just the Adobe leadership was super supportive in more ways than one. And when we moved here, that was 2007. We moved to Gurgaon, and I went from school to school, thinking there'll be a daycare. And they'd say, oh yeah, you drop them off at 9:30 and pick them up at 12:30. I'm like, what am I supposed to do for the rest of the time now? But really, the concept of daycare was not there. And I tried every kind of governess, every kind of nanny. It was just super hard to find reliable, good childcare. So that was the big difference, I think, in terms of infrastructure. When I was at Adobe in the US, pretty much everybody understood that you'd leave the office at 5:30, that you had to pick your child up from daycare, and then we'd log back in. Both my husband and I would log back in after 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or in the morning at 4 o'clock. Um, Whereas that sensitivity and that infrastructure did not exist in India. I think it's changed quite a bit. Since then, when I started my my second organization in Telethoughts early years, learning and care, it was in response to that personal challenge that we faced when we moved to
What would
India.
happen in India if you were to leave, let's say, at 5:30 to sort of pick up a child?
Yeah. So see, the thing is that a lot. It was as I said, young population of people, and the day would start later. So in the US, I'd reach at 8 o'clock and would be okay in the morning and would leave by 5:30. Here, just traditionally, the day starts later, 10:30, and therefore people work into late hours, like 8:39 is very common for people to leave. Now, especially for young mothers, that's very hard because, you want to get back home by 5:30 so that you can spend the evening with your kids. And I think that was kind of the cultural difference that was hard to manage. Despite the fact, I have to say that the the leadership, the team, I think they were extremely sensitive, very solution oriented, tried to find all sorts of solutions. But I think there is something about kind of the cultural context that you exist in.
I have a 1 year old myself, right? And I know I come in at 8 and I'm like by 5 I have to go out because 5:30 he needs to go out with his friends and
Yeah,
go to sleep at 7. If I don't get to see him now, when do I get to see him?
absolutely. And these are precious years. These are precious years when um, you do want to spend time with them. The child wants to spend time with you. They are really craving for your time. So these are special years, and it's important to prioritize that time.
Yeah, I remember in our conversation you did brought that up, right? Sometimes we're always contemplating if we leave now and maybe that 3 years, 4 years break in the career, it could just like hamper our career, right? What do you think about that?
When you zoom in and zoom out, right? When you zoom out, what you see is um, these are phases, and you go through these ups and downs and plateaus. Your whether your career graph or your life graph is never linear like this. You expect it to be. You think you get out of college, you get into a great job, you'll get married, have kids, and with time the graph will go like this. That never happens. The graph is always somewhat like this, plateau, dip. And what I have found is the biggest learnings happen when you are stuck here. When you are on the top of the whatever that local optima, local hill is, you feel like that's all happening because of me. Because I deserve it. I've worked very hard. I'm very smart. I've been able to balance. You begin to question when you are stuck here, and when you are really having to balance things, when you are really having to kind of say, what now? What do I do to climb back up? Right? And that's where a lot of the growth happens. That's where kind of some of the seeds for the great work you are going to do later. And women, you know, coming out of college, it's that decade between 25 to 35 when you're getting married, you have in-laws, your own family, your parents getting older, you decide to have children. There's just a lot of balls in the air, and those are all important balls, right? And you made choices to do that, and so it's okay to get in the slow lane. What I advise is don't get completely out of the arena. It's okay to be on the periphery for some time. If you are driving, don't completely get off the highway. It's okay to get in the slow lane. It's okay to get in the service lane. Um, but but keep your contact in some form or other with the professional world. Um, because these are phases. You spend 5 to 10 years are very intense when children physically need you. You can't leave them alone. Once children start going to school, they are gone from 7 in the morning, come back home now at least 3:34 most of the time. So you have all of that time available. That is one. The second is, because of all the hybrid work, fractional work, gig work platforms that have developed, there are multiple opportunities for you to stay engaged in some form or other. So that's what I say is, get in the slow lane. It's okay. It's okay to, get in the first, second gear. Uh, you will not be driving in the fourth gear and cruising all your career and all your life. You will be going through phases, and that's all right. And so in hindsight, when I look at my journey, as I said, the first 25 years were about freedom. So to be able to make the choices that you make. And then the next 25 years were about balance, just so many balls in the air. And not all of them will be flying beautifully at all points in time. And you just have to juggle and prioritize. But I would still say, wherever possible, stay in the arena rather than quitting the arena completely. It becomes very hard later. And in Udayti, that is one of the themes that I am working with the private sector on, and Udayti is working with them on, this whole problem of women in leadership, right? We have been beating this dead horse of the leaky pipeline and the missing middle, and that, we don't have a pipeline of leaders because women leave after 5 years, 4 years, and therefore you don't have a pipeline. Why not create returnship pathways? After 5 to 8 years or 10 years, at about 40, women are ready to get back into the workforce, right? And here is a talented, willing, employable talent pool that is available. Why can't we create some pathways into our workforce for them to enter? And again, I I'm saying the word pathway with a lot of thought. It's not entry or exit. One of the big problems I hear is, look, when we try to bring women back into the workforce, who experienced women after a long break, it's very hard for them to adjust. So it's not entry or exit. It is a pathway. You need to create a ramp to get from first gear to second gear to fourth gear. You can't directly go from neutral to fourth gear. There is a ramp. And so I think there is some work to be done there, to take advantage of this immense talent pool that can contribute, that can grow into leadership positions, but it will need a little bit of rethinking and redesigning of our workplaces to have those pathways for women to return back to work.
Which while I was doing research about you, I've heard you quoting this at a lot of places, and I wanted some more maybe insights on that, right? It's not just getting women in leadership role, but it's about creating an environment where they can thrive and grow, right? What kind of environment can organizations create so that such a talented pool feels like they belong there, right?
When we talk about gender diversity, right, or having women in leadership, um, there is this. Uh, I want to clarify that it's not about someone, a man or a woman, sitting there and saying, we are going to be discriminatory against women. Um, it is the result of um, the design of our workplaces, the way the culture, the way expectations, the way some of these workplaces have been designed, right? So I think the most important thing is for the top leadership in the company to realize the value of diversity and why diversity is important, and making it part of the agenda. Because private organizations, large organizations, they finally are profit making ventures. Top line, bottom line are paramount, but only when the leadership understands or believes that gender diversity will aid that, in some form of other, will there be conviction to make it happen. That is one. The second is, when you start to think about what to do, you'll have to create a business case, because, as I said, not individual is not sitting there to discriminate, but we are all products of our context. We are all products of the stereotype and the conditioning that we have grown up with. So it's almost like, my job is not to do this. Why should I do this? So it's a bit of a journey, and it takes time to build that business case as to why. One of the things that I talk about is, you think about she economy. I mean, women are making trillions of dollars worth of consumer decisions today. Across the world, about $32 trillion worth of decisions, consumer decisions, are being made by women. Whether it is what grocery we will buy, what brand of white goods we will buy, children's school, health, doctor, those are all decisions by women. If you do not have a representative sample of that in your leadership, you will not be able to compete, right? So that's one big enough reason on its own. The other is all of the research. There's enough research that's been done internationally to say organizations with diverse leadership, with diverse boards, diverse leadership teams, are just better at innovation, are more profitable, create more shareholder value, are more sustainable, win over the long run. So it's kind of the tension between the long run and the short run, and therefore the top leadership's commitment is very important, because if you're building an organization for the long run, you want to set it up for success. You want to have the diverse teams to enable success across your multiple cycles of change, paradigm shifts like we are going through today. So, I think top leadership commitment is very important. Second is um, to create that business case and communicate it to the next level. And the third would be to create mechanisms where you can listen, because um, only when women or people in minority are comfortable enough to speak up will you realize where the barriers might be, where the challenges might be. And that's the only thing that can spur the conversation for how do we dismantle the barriers.
Right. Are you familiar with what happened this week at Boeing? Boeing dismantled their DEI group, right? They say it doesn't make business sense for them.
Yeah,
Right? And I don't know how many more companies will follow that.
yeah.
Is there any advice you would have for people, maybe at Boeing or companies which do not look at diversity, equity, inclusion, belongingness as an important agenda of the organization?
Right. One of the themes there might be that it has to be part of the core organization strategy versus a small group trying to drive it. So even at Udaiti now, as we are working with organizations, as we are working with sectors, while HR is involved and has to be involved, and they're a very core player, the business leader has to be closely involved as well. So I hope that while a DI team per se, the naming is um, as a team is being removed, it's being incorporated into the core strategy of the organization. And the business case that I was talking about is, it's not just a good to have. It is necessary today. Even as we are kind of witnessing the AI driven paradigm shift, there are um, there are challenges on multiple fronts, and if we don't work towards it, it could snowball into a much bigger challenge. At least two parts I can talk about. One is just these biases getting hard coded in uh, the large language models and the data models. So, as an example, if you say a CEO, um, it basically will only show the male CEO, male white CEO in a blue suit and a red tie, right? And as these models evolve, that bias is going to get more and more deeply baked in. So when tomorrow a student, a 10-year-old kid is trying to create an image, that image is going to show up over and over and over again, right? When you show a nurse, it will be a woman. So you need to give a lot of thought to it, and um, I think not enough research is happening, even as we are seeing all of these models come up with OpenAI and Gemini from Google. I think there's a lot more thought that needs to go in, and it needs to be baked into the strategy. Um, and the second is that women are not using AI tools as much as men, almost 25% lesser than men. And that itself, that is also worrisome, because when we are thinking about the jobs of next decade, right, or what jobs would be relevant as humans, who will be successful, at least for the next 5 to 8 years, what we can see is people who are able to effectively use these AI agents and tools are going to um, really leapfrog their competition. And if women are not using them, then there's a problem, right? I kind of distracted a little bit from your core question of DEI, but the point is that just just having a team just focused on that.
Just like wellness, DI needs to be an agenda of the organization, has
Absolutely.
to be a strategy of the organization.
Yes. Again, these are all kind of public goods. These are all things that we took for granted. We took, we kind of assumed, okay, caregiving has to be free because the woman is doing it, right? That's how we've thought about these things. Climate, air is free. So, you build your industries, everything, that's a public good. You pollute, that's okay. But time has now come that as a society we need to solve for that. And so I do see a lot of parallels there and here when we talk about gender as well.
Probably I'll take you back to an incident that you told me about at Adobe, right? You were at Adobe when your children were very young, and probably at that time, maternity rooms, etc., were not in place, right? I want maybe for our audience for you to tell how did you go about navigating that situation?
When my daughter was born in the US, I was with a company called Palm Source, actually. First kid, I thought world is going to end if I don't get back to work very quickly. So I went back to work at after 9 weeks of maternity leave. Um, and But there was also that tremendous pressure that you want to nurse your kid for 1 year. It was almost like, you're not a good mom if you're not doing that. And so I was trying to figure out what to do. And um, again, the organization was very supportive on all fronts, but there was just no solution. So I did speak to HR and did speak to my manager, who was, by the way, super supportive. She possibly told me, go speak to HR, let's talk to them. And I spoke to the HR, and they said, okay, we will make one meeting room as a nursing room, and we'll put a poster there, and we'll have some time slots. We just make that into a nursing room. And and there were like 4 or 5 of us who were coming back from a maternity leave, and we were all very different backgrounds. One was I was in product marketing. There was another person who was VP of sales, a white woman. Another one was from engineering. She was a project manager in engineering, and another one was an assistant. She's Mexican, and we were all from these different walks of life, and we'd be using the nursing room, and it was very awkward at first, but then we became the best of friends. Um, but the point of this is to, one, have a culture or have a work environment where you feel comfortable enough to speak up and ask for these things. Um, and the second thing is for women or anybody who's feeling that, to actually speak up, knowing, speak up as if you are part of the solution and not part of the problem. When you speak up is when others will get sensitized that, oh, maybe we need to look for solutions here. And gradually that might become a sustainable solution, right? And I'm seeing that happen in a lot of great organizations in India as well, where some of these things you speak up. There is a that was a solution that was just like a cobbled up solution for the short term. But then when we moved into a larger building, we made sure that there is one room for nursing for new mothers. And so then it gets institutionalized that way.
Yeah, but I love the way you said, right? Just ask for it, right? And ask for it as if you're a part of a solution, right? And I think somehow, especially for women, I feel like a lot of times they recede saying, no, this will not happen instead of speaking up, right? I know I was asking someone to come for an interview. Why did you meet face to face? And she's in Jayanagar, and she said, my help is not there today, and she had a 8, 9 year old child. So I can't come face to. I was like, why don't you bring the child to office? The child can just sit there, anyways, 8, 9 year old child, and you have a discussion with us. But I think this is because I asked, right? Why are you not able to come? And she discussed this. But what if she wouldn't have asked? Then that option was not there. We would have just filled the position with someone else. Absolutely. Right? So I think that asking, and I think you also beautifully said for organization to create a space where people can speak up, right? They know that they would be heard. होगा नहीं होगा is a secondary thing, right? कि हमने अपनी बात रखी. I think that's what we look at homes also, right? We want to create an environment where our children, our loved ones can share with us. Right? So beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. Let me ask you something else also, right? You ran IntelliTalks for almost 10, 12 years, right? After even you were there as it became part of Clay and with Priya and all, you made sure everything was handed over well and did the integration well. What were, like, you would meet parents day in and day out, right? These were parents of young children, young families that you were seeing. What were the challenges you were seeing they were facing at the workplace? Of course, having a child, trying to make everything meet. What were some of the challenges that they were talking about that they were facing that would allow this life, this phase of their life smoother?
When we started IntelliTalks, there was this idealistic notion of uh, doing right by the kid, really designing everything around the child's well-being, right? And so we said, okay, until 2.5 years, the child should be with the parents. So we started with parent-child programs. And it was about parents coming in with their children. Um, and theoretically, that's the best thing. The first 3 years of a child's life, almost 85% of their brain is developing. That emotional, caring environment that the child gets with the parents, especially the mother, is plays a big role um, to lay a very strong foundation for life. And so we started with that, and then gradually, what we started to hear from mothers were like, Pooja, can you please keep them for longer? Can you please start a preschool? Can you please keep them for longer? And that's how we started preschool, because mothers wanted a break. And I'm really saying mothers because 90% were 95% were mothers. So they said once or twice a week it's fine, but that 3 hour period was the period when they got a lot of their work done. So we started with, we added that, and we were also growing, right? So we were evaluating how to grow. We started preschool, that did well, and then a number of a few, not too many, but a few parents said, "Can you keep our children after school until 4 o'clock, until we pick them up from work?" And we're like, "No, we don't want to do it." They said, "No, no, no, you have to do it. हम तो लेके नहीं जाएंगे कर कुरा के." We were forced to do it. And there were like 4, 5 children because of which we started this after school care program. And it was creating so much of a complication because we were set up to be a preschool. So morning to afternoon, and that's it. And and these parents just, they said, whatever, you figure it out, we are not leaving. So while we were just about to close this daycare program, because of these 3 or 4 parents, we could not. And then gradually that became our biggest offering, because in 2015, I want to say 14 or 15, this maternity benefits bill came in, which said that all organizations with about 50 employees needed to have a daycare. So we just started getting calls from like large organizations across the country, say, "Okay, will you set up a daycare for us? Will you?" And that became our biggest offering. So to go back to your question about, what were parents looking for, as mothers, as women are looking to go back to work, and our policy structure is such that you're getting 6 months of maternity benefits. At 6 months time, they're looking to go back to work, they need full-time daycare, and that daycare would have to be either close to home or close to work. And we also saw a lot of fathers using these on-site daycare services pretty much as mothers, right? So I think the one big piece was infrastructural challenge of, just having the right set of infrastructure for childcare. um, and that has a multiplier effect on the economy, because one is that um, the women, largely women, again, I'm not saying parent and women, they're able to go back to work. But the second part is a lot of caregivers end up being women as well. So it creates jobs for a lot more women as well. So it's pretty much a double benefit. So creating that childcare infrastructure is very important. That was kind of one big thing, and that's why when IntelliTots was acquired by Clay, I think we were very optimistic, hopeful, because Clay had a really India-wide strong infrastructure network in terms of physical locations for care. Second thing was that, even as these women, enjoyed motherhood, there was also this thing of needing adult company, needing intellectual challenge, even during that period of bringing up children, right? Because, um, you know, so you need to find that balance, and because of the way our workplaces are designed, our careers are designed, our expectations are, it's like all or nothing. You are either in a full-time role where you will have to go for a client meeting at 1 minute notice and travel and all of that, or it's nothing, or you are at home. And that was very hard on a lot of families, and I'd say not just women but men also, because they a lot of the fathers were supportive, they really wanted to, but it was the challenge of the way our workplaces are designed and infrastructure. And I have to kind of preface this by saying that this is like the privileged lot. If you go to the segment that doesn't have the luxury of this kind of choice, this kind of freedom, there the challenges are significantly manifold. There they are battling stereotypes, conditioning, their husbands not wanting to them leave, families not wanting to them. So there, those challenges are even more complex. It just adds on from here.
Like you did touch upon that, right? A lot of the caregivers are women. A lot of so at your doors, we also work with some 200 plus educational institutions, right? And a lot of these educational institutions, you also have. So whenever the educational institution would reach out to your doors, they say well-being of students, students, student, right? Or well-being of children, children, children. But do you think looking at well-being of that caregiver, of that faculty, staff, teacher, whoever that is also important, or given that they are grown-ups, they can manage things on their own?
Yeah. Um, I'll step back and set a little bit of context before answering that question. So, our kind of our economic theory has been written keeping in mind that anything that leads to growth or economic growth or GDP is when you produce or sell things. And that's what Adam Smith's thing is, that you maximize profit, you create things and you sell it, and that's what creates GDP. Everything else is taken for granted and for free. One of the things that's taken for granted is caregiving. That's how it was structured. Men would go out, women would take care at home, and that was the expectation. That was kind of, I don't know when it was, probably 200 years ago. Since then, there has been a lot of evolution, right? And while women still do primarily a lot of the caregiving, um, there is also that expectation that girls grow up with, right? Now, we've invested so much in girls' education, women's education. You can be who you want to be. You should be, you should be able to take up any career. There's always a tension between wanting to do this and wanting to do that, and how do you balance both of it, right? So the caregiver's role has evolved as well, and most of these are women. They're balancing all of these priorities, expectations, their own expectations, other people's expectations of them. And that puts a lot of burden and stress on them, um, and therefore the mental well-being of caregivers is as important, if not more, than of children. Because, like, at least from the IntelliTots context, I can tell you that it was very important that when the teachers came into IntelliTots, or the entire staff came into IntelliTots, it was a happy place. And even one person uh, not being, you experience that energy in the classroom, in the open areas. So how comfortable, how at ease the caregivers are, has a huge impact on the people that they're taking care of, whether it is elders, whether they're sick, whether it is students. um, and I'll end with one more observation on teachers, right? Teachers' jobs have become so much harder in the last decade.
Become very, like you use the right word, vendor customer
Very
relationship.
transactional and vendor customer. So that respect has gone out of that.
Not like a partner, right? Otherwise, like, I remember my mom will come and say, "Ma'am ने ये बोला है, मतलब that's it, right? You don't argue back on that." Yeah, and that's why you look up to them in a very different way, right? You would remember your
And now with these WhatsApp groups, etc., it's become very challenging for teachers, for teacher communities.
yeah. You have to be like giving updates. This happened, that happened. I think more than emotionally being able to invest, you have to invest in multiple people because there's so many multiple stakeholders now. And you're always feeling under that scrutiny, so you have less freedom, and that's why you feel that anxiety.
I remember when at Intelligence we had to kind of make the decision on CCTV cameras. It was so hard because it almost felt like we didn't trust the teachers. The pride that the teachers felt in being able to do it, and sometimes even misrepresentation, where you're watching it and parents would question everything. And parents were right, technology is available, they want to have access to it, but it led to its own set of challenges on the.
You're always under scrutiny, right? So you're not sure if I can do this. Sometimes that informal conversation, doing things also the other way helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But so much, right? From you invest, you mentor, you are a CEO yourself, you were the founder for 10, 12 years. What are some of the practices you do to center yourself when you're going through a lot of overwhelmed, feeling like, okay, so much is happening in life?
So for me, it's more retreat into silence in some form. It could be so, and it's different times, different things. When the children were little, it was yoga, and I'd wake up early in the morning, 5 o'clock, do my yoga. That 1 hour used to be my time, and it really helped me a lot. Because once the day would start, it would be about getting kids ready, going to work, all of that. So that was during that phase. It was that. And the second has been walks. I just love walks, and walks. I find them um, for different purposes. Just sometimes I just want the quiet and thinking time, uh, kind of clear out the spider webs in the head. Sometimes it might be just to listen to a podcast, to listen to an audible book. Others it might be to talk to talk to friends. But, and I think also the movement helps. So walks for me are a very kind of cleansing time for me. Um, I'll give an example of my daughter when she was in ninth grade. She's struggling a lot with anxiety, all the pressure of applying for colleges. She just felt like everything was about getting in the right college, and she's just generally stressed. And I don't think we as parents were helping either, because she almost felt like we had these high expectations of her which she could not meet. Um, and anything we'd say would turn into this big fight. And I thought a lot, when you talk to different people, they said, "Oh, you should do therapy. You should maybe look at medication." Eat all of that. But it was a journey as a parent. But one of the things then I felt was just being aware that what if I just back off and I just listen to what's going on with her, but also to create that space, right? When they are young, those spaces are easier to create. While you're picking them up from school, while you're driving them, while you're putting them to bed. As they get to 13, 14, 15 years of age, they don't want you to be hanging around. So I uh, I suggested to my daughter, I said, okay, do you want to go for a walk? Most of the time she'd say no, because she thought it'll be more of the same thing. She's only going to ask me, वो भेज दिया पेपर नहीं भेज दिया, उसमें कितना आया था, उस टीचर ने क्या कहा. So she would be like no. Finally दो तीन बार बोला, तो she said okay, I'll come with you. And I decided that during that walk I will not give any advice, any suggestion. I will only listen or only tell her how I'm feeling. And we got out of the house and she started talking. And she's an easy talker, she'll talk. She started talking. My first instinct was, oh, Anisha, but if I were in your shoes, I would do that. And I held myself back, I didn't speak. Again, 5 minutes later, she started to say, but Mama, I had to do that and I've forgotten to do that. And I said, that's okay, you can go back home. And that was my instinct. I held myself back. 20 minutes of a round and we got back home. Can tell you, I was physically nauseous by the time I reached home. I reached home and it was literally like I have to vomit it out. Like, Anisha, you said that, maybe you should do this. You said that, maybe you should do. But what that did was those walks became very sacrosanct places where I would not give any advice. And over a period of time, it was me training myself to just listen, um, and also share what I was going through, but no advice or suggestion. And that unlocked something, because she spoke. I was able to later on reflect on what was going on in her head, what was she struggling with, and possibly find solutions outside of it. Otherwise, most of the time, we as parents are thinking we know it, and what they're going through, uh, and and that leads to significant tensions. So these walks have also become very special places now, because my daughter now is studying in the US. So even now, if in the evening or the morning I'm walking, I'll be on phone with her, and we can have hours of conversation even while walking, or she will call me while she's walking to her class, or I will call her when I'm walking outside. Because the thing about walking is, if you keep your phones away, there is nothing else to do. If you walking together, then you talk.
I know I keep telling this to my mother as well, quite a few times, right? I keep telling her, "Mama, sirf suno," right? And I feel like the days when we have that, and I think something that she said very struck a chord with me. She's like, I get so limited time with you guys now. When you were children, I had so much time that I could let you be how you want to be, right? Now I get so little time with you guys. I want to tell what are good things, what are bad things. But I think, like you said, but the day she's just listening, I think that's the time we connect the most. Right? That I think, yeah. As parent, my son is very small, but I think that's also something that I am sort of trying to inculcate. I think they appreciate that. Right? What is wellness according to you?
Oh my God, that's a big question. I think wellness is a deep understanding of two eternal principles. One is know thyself, and two is everything flows. We live in a world where everybody is giving us advice on wellness. There are hundreds of books being published every day, and we know all of these basics, right? Eat well, eat protein, more fiber, less fried, less sugar, sleep well, protect your circadian rhythm, no blue light at night, exercise every day, invest in friendships and relationships. So those kind of standard things that you're hearing, right? But I think it's a very personal thing to say what works for you and what doesn't work for you. There are some standard principles that would be good to have, but over a period of time, as you reflect, as you become aware, I might enjoy a cup of coffee, you might enjoy a cup of tea. And so to say, tea is what makes me feel good, will not work for me. So I think that whole notion of, yes, there are some basic principles of wellness. Um, Meditation, right? Everybody says you should meditate. Meditation makes you feel good. But the thing is that different people are at different stages of life. They have different priorities. It might work for them, it might not work for them. So it is important to really spend the time to know yourself, to find some of those, to create a few sanctuaries in your day, in your home, in your work, where you can be free of stimuli, to really invest in knowing what you want and what gives you happiness and joy and what doesn't. And I think the challenge of our lives today is that it's very hard to have those sanctuaries. So you really almost have to battle to create those sanctuaries where you're free of stimuli. But I think that is one piece of it, which is to really know what works for you, based on certain general principles that you have to work on. The second is everything flows, is, this concept of zooming in and zooming out. Um, we get so caught up in our day to day, ongoing, lots of things that we are all doing. It's important to occasionally zoom out, to say, when you zoom out, you'll see some things, they're seeming big in our mind, they're not as big. What seems so big today, 6 months later, it just won't seem that big. And if you zoom out enough, you realize you yourself are a speck of dust, right, in this whole. So, but the thing is that you can't just stay at that level either. You have to zoom in to do all of the things that you need to do, and take care of all the tasks and your responsibilities, because that's what tells you how you have to do it. But when you zoom out, you begin to see things which are like, you can be, you grateful for that, you um you you but you don't see it until things have gone wrong, right? Or you zoom out. So there's this small line that I've written or thought about. It says, "गम तो महज होने से अपने होने का एहसास करा देता है, खुशियां बरसती हो तो भी उन्हें ढूंढना पड़ता है." So if you have a small prick, you will be obsessed with that. It will not let you forget that I have a small blister here. But everything else is going well in your life and you will not appreciate that.
And I love the way you said, right? Know yourself, create that toolkit saying what works for you, right? And probably these days on social media, there's just so much of noise, ye karo, wo karo, and that sometimes pulls you down, right? And even going to your second point where you said sometimes you're like, पर उसने तो वो कर दिया मैंने नहीं किया अभी तक, right? And then whatever great that is happening, there might be somebody doing greater than that, and you're like, no, but I'm not that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's something around scale or everything, right?
System. Right? Like, you're part of a system. You can't just look at one small element of the system and say, this is working, this is not working. And your system might be different from mine. Right? So you kind of, and zooming out enables you to see the system versus each of the nodes.
I probably would have probably take you back, right? When again you came to India, you had a ailing family member. Adobe allowed you to move here. I think you were facing challenges with terms of like with the take childcare, etc. in India. But Adobe also gave you work from home and the way you want to work, right? It's fine, you create your, but you still decided to part ways, right? I want to reflect on what was going on at that time.
One, that was a very tough decision because, again, it's a paradigm shift, right? You were kind of, it's kind of that first shift from freedom to balance, right? You kind of have worked your way up to a place where saying, I'm free to make my choices. You are working with your partner saying, both of us are building our careers, we'll be able to do that, we want this. And then you hit a point where you say you have to now figure out a way to balance some of these things, otherwise something will break. And um, and so when now I hear this that women can't have it all, I just say women can have it all, just not at the same time. So again, zoom out a little bit to increase the timeline over which you are evaluating it. You can't have it all right now, all the time. So So for us, both Alok and I, we thought a lot about how do we balance it. Um, that was one. And the second one was the entrepreneurial bug. I already was this kind of problem. I was seeing this after I had my daughter. I went into this rabbit hole of neuroscience and started to read a lot about how children's brains develop, the nature versus nature, how are they learning. I used to find it magical that my daughter, like, she was, one day she couldn't speak a word, next day she could, then she could be framing sentences, she could do all of that. And I'm like, it's all happening on its own. And, so it was quite, I was quite fascinated by it. And then when we moved to India, I felt like somehow there was this great dichotomy. It's like, okay, we all know theoretically that the early years are such important years of your life, but somehow as a society, we just don't place any importance on it. And we say that like real education, actually real learning only starts when you go to school, which is in first grade, which is by sixth, which according to, by your brain is so developed by that time already. So that idea had germinated in my head, had been germinating for almost 3 years. I was thinking about it, and when we came to India and I kind of saw that, I saw there was a great opportunity to take advantage of and really to solve that problem.
Yeah, I think also sometimes, right, like you said, right, for women to zoom out and you can probably have it all, but probably at a look at it from a long term perspective, right? At the age of 70, 80, 90, you would not be regretting कि एक साल ऐसा हो गया, right? या एक साल ऐसा हो गया, or I did something else. So that's very true. I think sometimes we don't take a such a long perspective on our life, right? And we are like, but मेरे साथ वाला तो ये कर रहा है. That's all that we are into. That's true. And I also like the way you said, right? Sometimes workplace also make all the arrangements that possible. But maybe what works for me, maybe when you were in product marketing and you were like going out in the field, getting a job which is maybe work from home might not have done justice to your role as well, right? Whereas building something which is more, you felt that was more meaningful,
Yeah.
and it should also allow you to, learn more about your own children as well. You found that more exciting, right? Sometimes to say also listen to what is working for me. I think going back to your, I think that really, really helps.
It's also become more important now, Richa, as we are talking about longevity and 100-year lives. Again, there is a paradigm shift happening there where we are used to our socio-economic systems with, say, 75-year life by and large, right? That okay, you do your education, then go into the work, and then you retire, right? And now we are looking at 100-year lives, um, and this will become even more important to really say that you don't have to do everything at the same time. It is true even for our children, right? We want them to sprint and to get all of those good things because that's been our way of thinking. That's how we've been brought up कि भाई पहले अपनी पढ़ाई खत्म कर लो फिर तुम काम करना फिर एक बार if you get married, if you are into work, you'll never be able to go back to studies. But now when we are looking at such longer lifespans, it becomes even more important to pace yourself.
Yeah, and to know what you like, right? You might have multiple careers. You need not start at a maybe a product person and remain a product person, right? You
Absolutely.
might want to do something very different. Right, really. I want to ask you, what was that one most vulnerable moment of your life, and did it change anything in your mindset?
I think the moments where you are forced to question your framework and your way of thinking are the hard moments, moments when you're vulnerable. So the instance I told you about, this transition from freedom to balance, to say, look, is this stepping back? Is this not stepping back? In the longer run, possibly no. At that time, it probably seemed like it, right? Again, when we are bringing up our children, it's a lot about, there's you get attached to their success. And when you see like your child is struggling with something, you almost take it personally, that you feel very vulnerable at that time because so far any problem that came, you were able to address it, you were able to solve it because it is in your hands. But when it comes to your child, and even when the child is younger, you can step in. Child is older, um, it's it's hard to see them in that state. But you also know the right thing is to let them figure it out and to let them fail. And gift of failure is probably the biggest gift for them. So that is the hardest thing to do. Still trying to. Still trying to. Our daughter is right now applying for college. A younger daughter is applying for college. And, she's pretty good at meeting deadlines, etc. And then between Alok and I, will be thinking, oh my God, she's not done this, she's not done this. Um, just 2 days back, our daughter, she was supposed to submit some research paper, and we had been reminding her for the last week, 10 days. Uh, the deadline is there. You have to go put it. You have to go submit it. Finally, she turns back at us and says, just by you two telling me that I have to do it doesn't make it happen. I know it. I will do it. So and that makes sense. But it's very, very hard. It's very, very hard, and it is only, I guess, it's to be aware and to hold yourself back in a lot of these places, um, because you are trying to avoid the hurt that comes from a child not being able to accomplish what they want to accomplish. I want to pave the way so that they're able to. Um, it's hard, and yeah, we try a lot. It probably succeed in some cases.
You have two beautiful girls, right? Tomorrow, if you want to think about how should the organizations be, so that you as a parent will be at peace when your children are going for work. What are some of those characteristics of those organizations?
Creating a space where you can bring your best self and do your best work and really move in the direction of fulfilling your potential. In and it could be over a short period of time, it could be over a long period of time. I know this sounds a little idealistic, too high level, but creating places of trust where um, where different people feel comfortable about voicing their opinions, because especially as the world moves so fast, historically we've always celebrated heroes, that one person, the hero's journey, that one person who can go out and fight the battle and then come out victorious and bring victory for the whole team and the country and so on, right? I think in the world of today, it's extremely important to have multidimensional, diverse teams who are feeling comfortable enough to speak up, regardless of their gender, regardless of their ability, or I would say regardless of their status as a minority, whether you're saying LGBTQ, you're saying differently abled, because the world is complex and is getting more and more complex and is changing at a pace where we've never experienced that pace of change ever before. So creating an environment where the voices are heard regardless um, of your gender, of your whatever your sexual preference, your religious or political beliefs, I think is extremely important. And the success of leadership lies in creating mechanisms that can make that happen and make them sustainable.
Creating that psychological safe space, right, where people can just go up, talk like the way you did when you wanted the nursing room as well,
Yeah.
right? That they are able to voice their opinions, because that's when the changes can happen. In fact, at your those also, we do these assessment or survey, right? When people ask us, so we, for a decade, we've been working into workplace well-being. And when people ask us, we always say it's not about the activities you're doing. It's not a tick in the checkbox. Ye bhi kar lo, ye bhi kar lo, ye bhi kar lo. It's about creating that safe space. That's also what our research says, that where people can feel belonged, right? It's psychologically safe, and there is well-being of people on their physical, mental, and some of those dimensions as well, right? So very strongly resonate with, I think, what future might look, because we don't know what careers will be there, what skills would be there, right? Would be required, what we would be creating in the future, but something only if we can hear each other, if we can listen to each other really, not really to answer back, but to really absorb what they are, we will be able to create that space where teams can come together, that the magic happens, and not just that one hero showed the everything that used to happen earlier, right?
And it's a journey, I think, Richa. As we are working with some of the organizations and sector on the gender diversity part as well, you kind of start from being aware, so the gender aware, to getting to compliance, like you said, checkbox. That's a journey, and that's fine. There are some things that to being gender tactical, you essentially make sure that these are at least the baseline things we will do beyond compliance. to becoming gender integrated, where it's just part of your culture, you feel you belong, and gender transformative, where you then become an example for others in the sector. So I'm of course viewing it from the gender lens because of our work at Udaiti, but that would hold true for other things as well, that it will be a journey over a
It'll be a
period of time.
journey. It's not like a destination, and we have to be conscious about it because that's what create great places, right? Thank you so much. So lovely, Pooja. I have learned so much from you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure everybody watching will learn so much from you. Thank you so much for doing what you do.
Thank you so much. Loved the conversation and love the work you do at your dose. All the very best.
Thank you.